Hi, this is Gene Bohensky from Reel to Reel Warehouse, your source for refurbished reel-to-reel tapes from every generation that tapes were produced. This video is going to show and explain all about Radio Shack's Concertape and Ampex's Shamrock line of reel-to-reel tapes. These are the tapes that cause so many people trouble, and they're kind of unique because it's kind of a window into an industry that doesn't exist and a business practice that doesn't exist. These tapes were sold as reject stock from good production that couldn't be sold as good production. In today's day and age, no manufacturer would ever do this anymore. They would make sure that everything that they produce is high quality. But with tape production, it was a little bit different. With tape production, you had batches that weren't to spec, and it was because you couldn't control, I guess, presumably you couldn't control the quality easily, and you had a lot of out-of-spec tape that found its way into budget brands and budget tapes that people used for less than critical applications. Let's say you wanted to record voice or record something that wasn't critical, you would use a cheap tape. So Concertape was sold through Radio Shack, and it was really just a private label tape from Ampex that was the same as the Shamrock tapes. And I want to explain that there were many different formulations that were put into the box. And what this purpose of this video is to explain all of the different types of concert tapes that were made so that you can kind of tell what they are by looking at them. Some of them are usable, some of them are not. Some of them can be baked and some of them can't be baked. So let's just go over the packaging first. This is a typical Concertape package. This is their early package. All the different types of Concertape were put into this package, and it ranged from the late 60s until the mid 80s. This is the later Concertape package. This is what they ended up with in the 80s. I think it even went to the early 90s where they were still putting in the reject stock into these boxes. And this is a typical Shamrock package. They all kind of look like this. They did vary in color. There were some in a blue box, some in a light green box. They also sold this in Europe in department stores. It was kind of interesting, but they all had the similar design box. They also sold this under the Charter brand, also under the Emerald brand, and they're also under the Ampex 291 and 292 series, these audio-visual tapes. Those were also the reject stock. We got a bunch of those and found that as well. The other tape that also falls under this category is the Ampex low-noise, high-output tape that was sold by Pacific Stereo. That has the 1800 feet logo on that box in dark blue. There's a lot of that running around, and that was also reject stock. I don't really like that because they were selling tape that was low noise, high output, that was obviously not low noise or high output. They actually sold some of the instrumentation tape as low noise, high output stock, which really was selling something that it wasn't. It was really fraud. Which I don't think anyone would like. So let's talk about the different Ampex, Shamrock / Concertape grades that went to the box. I classify them in 8 major categories. Category 1 is the first versions, which are like the reject acetate or mylar stock of Ampex's first generation of their ferrocene tapes, like the 311s, 611s, those are on the acetate side, 641, 341, 541. These tapes work fine. There's not going to be any sticky shed or shedding problems with them. From that standpoint, they're going to act just like the other branded tapes. They might have some output fluctuations, which is a common complaint, but they will still be usable, and you can still transfer the material off those. The second classification I call type 2. These are gray oxide tapes. So sometime in the mid 60s, the manufacturers were experimenting and releasing low noise tapes with a gray oxide. That would be the Ampex 431 and 444 series. And you see versions of that in the Shamrock box. In fact, I think I have one of those here in the Shamrock box, where we have an 041 that is that has a gray oxide, and that is actually that version of the tape. The third version is an actual later gray oxide tape that actually is sticky. Sometimes it really, the only tapes we know officially that have sticky shed are the ones with back coating, like from Ampex or Scotch. But I suspect that they were doing a lot of experimentation on coating materials, and for a while they were making gray oxide tape that did turn sticky. Like the other gray oxide tapes or other tapes from Ampex that turn sticky, you can bake them. So you can bake Concertapes and Shamrock tapes to get them to work. The fourth type are back-coated tapes. These are back-coated gray oxide tapes. These also fall into basically a type A and a type B. Some of them have a slight gray tint. Some of them have a slight brown tint. I suspect that they were variations of the low noise, high output tapes that they produced under the Plus series or ELN series tapes. They weren't the Pro tapes. These were more of the consumer grade tapes. They back coated them. I don't really see any evidence that they sold those as back coated tapes officially. They just made them for the junk stock, which is kind of odd because there's no real consumer or pro equivalent. Anyway, some of those tapes actually work pretty well today. Some of them are even not sticky, especially the earlier ones. The Type 5 tapes, and those are kind of interesting. The Type 5 tapes were produced for quite a while in the 70s. I'll show one of them here. That's not the right one. One of those tapes here, it has a brown oxide and a graphite backing. Now, these are very interesting because this was tape that was originally made for 8-track tape cartridges. And one of the things about the 8-track tape cartridges, you might know, they have this infinite loop system where the tape is always running past each other. And they needed an additional lubricant on that tape, and that was the actual graphite backing. I don't know if you can see it here, but the graphite backing is kind of silver when the actual tape itself is brown. I suspect the tape is similar to like an Ampex 641, a standard oxide tape, maybe with an extended range oxide coating. We sell these tapes for two uses. There's people out there that want this tape because they want to create 8-track cartridges of new music. There's a couple of companies out there that will create 8-track cartridges for you of newer releases that weren't available when 8-tracks were available. The second thing you can use them is for some musical instruments or musical echo devices. There's a famous Roland Space Echo that uses the special graphite back tape. You can use this tape for that, and it's available in stock. So we classify them by type. The sixth type of tape are the reject master tapes. These were primarily sold in Europe. They weren't so much sold in the Concertape boxes. I didn't really find many of those, but they were sold in Europe as decent tapes. They were reject Ampex 406, 456, 407, 457 on the long play end. When new, these tapes had fantastic performance. They were also sold to studios as Ampex 031. There's a couple of studios that swore that those tapes were just as good, but I'm not so sure. Some of the reviews at the time said they had some issues with dropouts and inconsistent output. Anyway, those tapes are available. They need to be baked if they're going to be used. So just like the Ampex and Scotch tapes of their day, if you want to use them again, you need to bake them. And the same goes for Type 7 tapes. Type 7 are later concert tapes that are gray oxide with graphite backing. On the later versions, those are the ones that come into the latest design. Those tapes have, you can't really tell too easily between the two. The one that is Type 7 is a little bit heavier, and the oxide, the tape fills the entire reel. I suspect those are similar to the Ampex extended low noise tapes. They have kind of a standard output. Those sound pretty good, although they also suffer from sticky shed. The last version, which is the Type 8 version, and there's a ton of this that was sold in Concertape and on Shamrock, are reject Ampex instrumentation tape. That instrumentation formula was $7.97 on the Ampex side. They sold a ton of that in Concertape and Shamrock. The unfortunate thing for that tape is it had a very low output, and the sound is very tinny on it when you're going to try to record music on it. It's not really suited for music. And it also suffers from sticky shed. So if you have anything recorded of any value on that tape, it needs to be baked in order to be used. I wouldn't recommend using that instrumentation tape for any purpose, although it has been tried at the slow speed. You can use that with a noise reduction system and keep the record levels low, and you can kind of get a quality sound out of it. But generally, it's not considered a proper tape. So any of those 8 grades, they all have their issues. Some of them are useful, and some of them are not. Right? The first Type 1 and Type 2 are pretty good. The Type 4, the original older back-coated tapes, seem to be pretty good. The graphite tapes are also good. I will also caution, if you're going to use graphite tapes on regular tape decks, you might have problems, because the graphite does have a tendency to shed and can dirty up your tape path or dirty up your heads. In some cases, the lubrication is too great, and what happens is that the tape ends up slipping past the heads because it's not really designed to be used with standard tape decks. And of course, Type 6, the master tapes, need to be baked. 7 and 8 also need to be baked, but they have a lower output and not really suited for recording. So if you get a pile of Shamrock or concert tapes, you're going to have to go through them. At Reel to Reel Warehouse, that's what we do. I go through all those tapes and classify them and sell them in their individual categories, particularly the ones that are good. I don't sell the ones that are junk, but I do sell the graphite back tapes and the tapes that don't need baking to play. Once again, Gene Bohensky, Reel to Reel Warehouse. Thanks for listening.